Presbyterian Church. Yes, I am Pastor Robert Woodruff. Can you hear me okay? Now, besides being a Spanish multicultural church since 1889, next door is where FaithWorks is running a clothing reception and distribution center. And then next door into the back, we have a 3-bedroom apartment, Casa de las Rosas, that Ama Rosa, who's sitting in the balcony, helps run, as well as the Santa Fe Dreamers. And that has for 4 years been focused on trans asylum seekers who've been staying there. It is encouraging to see every one of you here. And gratitude all around for all that you do. We are blessed this morning by the presence of Ruben Garcia, who is here to update, to motivate, and to inform with regards to what he sees coming, how we can strategically best revamp for the city's hospitality infrastructure for what likely promises to be a huge influx of people coming across the southern border. If you need a restroom, please do not be bashful. Just head out this door, down the hallway. It is to your right. Also, after Ruben addresses us, there will be a time for question and answer. So Savannah, who's sitting in the back, has a microphone, so your question can be heard. Just simply raise your hand and she'll bring it to you. Let us pray. Humbled by the majesty of your creation, we give you thanks, O God. For human brokenness that pervades your creation, we ask forgiveness. As we together seek work for your justice and restoration, give us courage and character, persistence and patience. Oh, how we long for your kingdom to break into the world a little more every day. And all God's people said, Amen. Welcome, Ruben.
Buenos días. No se pueden imaginar qué gusto ver tantos de ustedes aquí. Me llena. Gracias. I want you to know that I come bearing, on behalf of the Governor of Texas, who is offering free transportation to DC. We were able to talk to him, and he finally conceded to offering free transportation to Hawaii, the beaches there. So be sure that you put your name if you would like to go to Hawaii for a couple of weeks, courtesy of the generosity of the governor of the state of Texas. Okay? Never one to be outshone by other states. He wants to be sure that everybody understands Texas hospitality. I am so grateful to all of you for being here this morning. I'm Ruben Garcia. I'm the director of Annunciation House. We've been offering hospitality to refugees for over 44 years, and we've learned a great deal. I'm very grateful to the city of Albuquerque because during the 2018-2019 surge, when immigration released 150,000 refugees to us, Albuquerque was part of the process of welcoming and providing hospitality to part of that 150,000. And so collectively, it was possible for all of us to ensure that 150,000 people had a place to sleep, food to eat, place to wash up, individuals that were able to help them connect with sponsors, make travel plans, get them to the airports, to the bus stations, and they went on. Right now, I want to very quickly give you an update as to where we are at this moment and where we anticipate being in very short order. During the Trump administration, 2 policies impacted the border tremendously. One of them, the Migrant Protection Protocol, which was when individuals claiming asylum were allowed to file the claim, but then they were sent back to Mexico to wait in Mexico until they had their hearings, they would cross over for the hearing and then go back to Mexico to wait. The other was Title 42. That is a provision in the Health Code of the United States that is under the jurisdiction of the Center for Disease Control, which gives the CDC the authority to close the border for health reasons. They used Article 42 to issue an order to close the border to what they defined as non-essential traffic. What it basically meant is if you had a B1, B2, which is your tourist visa, you could not come over. And then of course, if you didn't have any kind of visa, your refugee population, you could not come over. If you did cross, it authorized Border Patrol to expel you immediately. And this is what I say to people. Donald Trump did get his wall. It's called Title 42. That is what allowed this expulsion of refugees across the entire border. Title 42 was used as border enforcement. It was stated that it was being used for part of the pandemic response. It wasn't. It was a border enforcement tool that proved to be extremely effective. As time went on, problems developed with Title 42, especially in response to the reaction from Mexico in its willingness to receive all the people that were being expelled. In addition to that, there are certain nationalities that for various reasons could not be expelled. Where we are right now, Title 42 is still enforced. It is especially enforced in the El Paso sector of Border Patrol. The El Paso sector of Border Patrol includes the entire state of New Mexico. It's from the New Mexico-Arizona border all the way to a part of West Texas down to Presidio. So all of the activity in that geographical area is part of the El Paso sector, and it is overseen by the Border Patrol station in El Paso. So anyone that is apprehended in the state of New Mexico is transported to El Paso, and they're processed there, and they're held in what is called the Central Processing Center. There they get expelled. Right now, we are not expelling individuals from Nicaragua. We are not expelling individuals from Cuba. We are not expelling individuals from Venezuela. We are not expelling individuals from Ukraine. And we are not expelling family units from Haiti. We are expelling single adult individuals from Haiti. The structure for these expulsions are first along the border, where Border Patrol takes you to a port of entry and just tells you to walk back to Mexico. They're also doing direct flight expulsions back to home countries. If you're Brazilian, they'll transport you to Yuma, Arizona. From there, they'll put you on a plane and fly you back to Brazil. If you're from Guatemala, they'll fly you to Brownsville, put you on a plane, and expel you back to Guatemala. If you are Haitian, they'll send you to Laredo, put you on a plane, and expel you there back to Haiti. So the Central Americans, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Panama, South American countries, Ecuador, Brazil, Colombia, they're being expelled. But there are some nationalities that are not being expelled, and those numbers are going up. Even before the end of Title 42, the numbers are going up. We are now receiving, having released to us in excess of 2,000 refugees per week that are coming to us, and that is climbing fairly steadily and fairly rapidly. And so the need for hospitality sites is now here even before Title 42. as we look toward May 23rd, and this is something that I said last night, and I'm repeating it with every group that I speak with, we're going to have to undertake an incredible organizing effort to bring into existence hospitality sites that can receive the refugees, give them a place to stay, and then help them move on to connect with family and friends in the interior of the United States. It's going to be Herculean, the effort that's going to be required to set this up and to organize it. I personally am very concerned as to whether or not Title 42 will actually be lifted on May 23rd. I am concerned that the Democratic Party is going to put the list of the senators and the congressional representatives that are up for re-election. They're going to start counting the number of heads that are going to be lost if Title 42 results in a chaotic border, and the Republican Party makes hay with that, and that it will take President Biden on May the 20th to announce that out of an overabundance of concern for the BA2 Omicron variant, that Title 42 is going to be, the lifting is going to be postponed to November the 10th, for example. So, the reason that is of such great concern to me is that we're going to invest an incredible amount of energy to set up for May 23rd, and we may find that effort postponed, and I'm concerned that it'll take some of the energy out of the effort. So I want to put that out there for you so that you understand that we're going to do a lot of work, and then we may have to postpone that. Nonetheless, Title 42 will at some point come to an end. Right now, immigration, ICE, Border Patrol, and the Office of Field Operation, these are the CBP officers that staff the border, the ports of entry. All of them right now are functioning full speed ahead on the assumption that Title 42 is going to be lifted. They're functioning on that. And they are preparing for what that is going to mean. The ports of entry, for example, are having to deal with the reality that once Title 42 is lifted, refugees who approach the ports of entry will not be allowed to be denied entrance. They're going to have to allow them to present, and they're going to have to process them, and then allow them to come in to proceed with the process of asylum. All of us have to understand that immigration has the authority to detain people who are in immigration proceedings. The reason that they don't is because they don't have the capacity, they don't have the facilities. So this is why they process and then they release to NGOs like Annunciation House. But they have the authority. If they had detention facilities 100 times the capacity that they do, they could potentially detain everybody. The law allows them to do that. They just don't have that capacity. That's why they release. And that's an important point to make for people that think that people are simply, that the border is wide open. It isn't that at all. It's that it takes an enormous amount of tax dollars to operate detention facilities. Putting aside the whole issue of whether or not asylum seekers should be detained in the first place, that's a whole other discussion, but it takes a lot of tax dollars. The ports of entry are going to have to process people, refugees, as they arrive to the ports of entry. You're going to have many other refugees that are going to cross between the ports of entry, which is what is usually referred to as illegal entries. There is a legal for people that come in through the ports of entry. That's the way you're supposed to do it. The ports of entry were never built to handle those kinds of volumes, but they're still going to have to deal with it. Immigration, the Department of Homeland Security, as they do their planning, they've asked themselves, what do we have to prepare for if what happens after May 23rd is on the low end? What they define as the low end is 6,000 refugees per day entering the United States along the entire southern border. That's the low end that they're looking at. If it's kind of not on the low end, but not on the high end, kind of the middle, they're looking at 12,000 refugees per day entering. If it ends up to be on the high end, they're estimating 18,000 refugees entering per day. To kind of give you a perspective on that, the last fiscal year, Border Patrol apprehended 1.7 million refugees. That's October 1 to September 30 of 2021. If 18,000 refugees enter per day, and that was to be the case consistently for a month, in 1 month, it would amount to 1/2 million refugees. That is 6 million refugees in a calendar year. That kind of gives you some sense of what we're dealing with. No one believes that you're going to have 365 days of 18,000 per day entries. That there will be some days that it will be that, other days when it would be lower. We know that the weather impacts migration patterns. We know that we're entering that time of the year where we see the highest increase in the number of refugees approaching the border. We are also aware of the fact that during the pandemic, there has been Title 42, there has been MPP, which has served as a push-back factor that once removed, there is pent-up energy among the refugee population to come in. We are also seeing nationalities in greater numbers that we never saw really to any great extent in 2018, 2019. We didn't see Nicaraguenses in 2018, 2019. We're now seeing Nicaraguenses. We didn't see Venezolanos the way we're seeing them now. We obviously didn't see any people from Ukraine, and we're seeing them now. The reason that I am here this morning is because we desperately need to have the city of Albuquerque, very specifically the faith communities of Albuquerque, to consider opening up their facilities to provide hospitality to refugees. We can get immigration to transport the refugees to Albuquerque. What we need are the hospitality sites that are able to host refugees, depending on what the size of the facility is, by churches and the volunteers to staff those. We want the hospitality sites in Albuquerque for 2 reasons. One, because we're able to tap into the volunteer potential pool that is available in Albuquerque to help staff hospitality sites. And secondly, we need to be able to access the transportation hub of Albuquerque. We're very concerned that as a result of the pandemic, airlines have reduced the number of flights, and now it's harder to find flights, and the airlines are challenged in being able to call back their flight crews. They're finding that the flight crews haven't just been sitting there waiting to be called back. Some of them are no longer available. And so they're having a challenging time to reactivate their flight crews. And so we're very concerned that if we don't find a way to send refugees outside of El Paso, it's going to start backing up. And so hospitality sites are going to get locked down. And it's already been made very clear that Border Patrol and ERO and OFO, the three of them, they're very, very clearly saying we do not want to release people to the street. But if the NGO structure, the faith communities, isn't able to receive all of the people that we have to release, we're going to have no choice but to release them to the street. I am hoping to be able to set up a network in both Denver and Dallas so that we can send refugees to Denver and Dallas in addition to Albuquerque for the same reasons, to be able to tap into the volunteer pool in those communities, church communities, faith communities, as well as to be able to tap into their transportation hubs. We still have not found a way to get ICE to transport to Denver and to Dallas. In 2018, 2019, we were able to send 4 buses to Denver and Dallas, but we had to pay for that. We had to raise the money to send those chartered buses there, and it's like $6,000 per bus to send a full bus to these places. So we're still trying to figure out how we can find a way to transport so that we can distribute as best as we can, so we have hospitality that is available in El Paso, Las Cruces, Albuquerque, Denver, and Dallas. I'm here to invite you, to pray with you, to ask the Spirit of God to come and let us turn on our television sets and see what the people in Poland have been doing with the millions of Ukrainians that have had to flee, and they're finding a way. You know, they're not looking at what's happening on the border and saying, oh, you know what, we need to set up a committee to see about what we're going to do. They're not doing that. They're saying they're here, and so let's roll up our sleeves and let's start responding. And that's why I'm here, is to appeal to you to look at the churches that have space and to say, we are going to activate. Maybe the space that we have can only accommodate 30 people. That's fine. We'll take 30 people once a week, twice per week. We can receive 50 people, maybe once every other week. Whatever churches can do, if enough churches come forward, we're going to be able to accommodate, whether it's 6,000 per day that come in across the border, or 12 or 18,000. We hope that after the fiscal year, we can say they released these tens of thousands and they all had hospitality that was available to them. So, any questions? Yes?
Do you have a sense of how the Ukrainians are dealing with the refugees?
Well, are you speaking about how
I'm sorry, the Poles.
initially, and this was something that really struck me, the initial wave of Ukrainian refugees that entered Poland appealed to families directly. They basically said, take people into your home, and families started taking families in. The first several 100,000 Ukrainians that entered Poland went into individual homes, okay? We've never used that model. There's a lot of, issues with using that kind of a model. Our preference is to use church facilities and or hotels. Both of those models are volunteer intensive, okay? So they need a lot of volunteers. Okay, yes ma'am.
I'm a pastor at First Presbyterian, and we were one of the sites during the last wave. And
When can you receive the first bus? We're not gonna mess around, okay? So.
we're talking about it, but my memory was people generally were moving on after about 3 or 4 days. Most people seem to already have contacts or family in the States, and I'm just wondering if things had changed, like as far as hosting, would it be the same thing where you'd generally be hosting people for, up to a week maybe until they can get transportation, or what's your sense of timing?
Okay. That, at this particular moment, that continues to be the norm, that the majority. We are finding that the population that I was most concerned about were the Haitians and whether they were gonna have sponsors, but we're finding that they do have sponsors, where we see a little bit more of a challenge over people from Venezuela, that they have, there's more of an incidence of people from Venezuela who may not have a sponsor. But I'm still saying 99% of all the people that come, and what sometimes is keeping people a little bit longer are seats on the plane, seats on the buses, but they're still moving on. Yes, ma'am.
So in the last surge, one of the things that was being put in place, just before they shut off the immigration, was to use the state fairgrounds here in Albuquerque, and that was arranged through the city of Albuquerque. Is that something that you would suggest is a good idea, and has negotiation with the city been open?
I'm here because I need hospitality sites. If it's a hotel, if it's a parish, if it's a fairground, all of it is good. The one thing that I would caution is not to get bogged down with politics. Okay, that's why I tend to gravitate towards faith communities, because with faith communities, everybody says, hey, my politician is God, and God is pretty, open to taking care of the least among us. So that would be my only caution, that fairgrounds is great if the city is pliable, workable, and is with you. But if you start bumping into politics, then I would say take a step back and ask yourself whether that's really gonna work for you. Yes?
What if they don't have a sponsor?
Again, we have found that 99% of the people, in fact, do have a sponsor. When we find someone who does not have a sponsor, then it begins a surge in the United States to see if there is a community that is willing to receive that individual or that family. And then they may be with us for several weeks while we help them find a sponsor. That does happen. The percentage is quite low when that does happen. And this is something for you to keep in mind, that there is a place right now, when Pastor was talking about the hospitality that you are offering to trans asylum seekers, there is a space for specialized hospitality. And that's an example of a specialized. Someone who says, we have this space, it's not very big, but it could probably accommodate 12, 13 people. We're gonna offer ourselves to other hospitality sites. If you do have someone who doesn't have a sponsor, we'll take them from you and we'll work with them until we find them a sponsor, and then they can move on. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why we want to move people on is that everyone will have an immigration case that is going to have to be docketed someplace. You can go to the University of Syracuse's website where they monitor all of the immigration courts, and they literally will list every single immigration judge in the United States. It will tell you how many cases they have in their court. They will also give you the percentages of asylum grants per judge. So they will say, here is Judge A, and this judge on asylum grants 50% of their asylum claims. Here is Judge B, and this judge grants 3% of their asylum. So it varies. Unfortunately, the grant rate of asylum for the judges in the El Paso jurisdiction is incredibly low. It's very low. And so I say to people, there you go. I say to them what you just said. Yes. So that's why. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, will there be an organization or organizations here, like Catholic Services or Faith Works, that we work through as a church, can offer some support? I mean, I don't know what kind of volunteer support we need, right? Like some training, some support for churches.
Okay. What I am saying to the people that I'm speaking with on this trip, I'm not here to say to you, let's organize, because so often nothing will come from that. I'm here to say, I need you. I'm speaking to you individually and directly. I need you to activate. If you are a member of a church, look at the possibility of whether your church has space to offer hospitality. There's a lot of latitude on that hospitality. I can receive a bus on a Monday, and then as people get their bus tickets or plane tickets, most probably by Wednesday or Thursday, they're all gone, and we get our church building back to use on the weekend for our activities. My church be able to do that. Maybe I'm part of a church where we don't have that kind of space. Then the question becomes, can my church help provide the volunteers to help another church that does have space? If I'm the pastor here and I have space, there may be neighboring churches that don't have space, but they say, we're going to help with volunteers. We will help provide the dinner meal on Monday when they arrive, and the dinner meal on Tuesday. Our volunteers will prepare the meal, will bring the meal, will serve the meal, will clean up after the meal. Another church can say, our volunteers will take on the responsibility of a small clothing bank, so that when the people arrive, the refugees arrive, they can do changes of clothing. So there's room for everybody. But that's why I'm speaking with you directly, individually. I don't want you to leave this morning and say, I want to be part of a committee. I want you to leave this morning and say, what do I want to do? We're about to enter Holy Week. What do I want to do? What can I do? Under who can I light a fire in my faith community? Yes, sir.
I understand what you're saying about not having a committee. Of course, you're talking to Presbyterians who have no interest in committees. I'm wondering because, you can have churches who've never done this before and they don't know logistically what all is needed. Like people need places to go to the bathroom. They need places to brush their teeth. They need shower facilities. They need food. They need sleeping facilities. And my concern is that, you know, some people may go into this not realizing all the things they need and just be furthering a humanitarian disaster by bringing people into their facilities who don't have, where the facilities aren't equipped to care for them and deal with them, and don't think through all the things that they need to you know, to show compassion. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And I just feel like, you know, Annunciation House has been doing this for years and years and years, and so it's second nature to you to know what people need. And but for a church that's never done this before, they may not anticipate all the things that are needed to care for people inside their facilities.
Okay. In 2018, 2019, after some conversations, Annunciation House, in coordination with some people in Albuquerque, said Annunciation House is coming to Albuquerque and we're going to activate 2 hotels. Annunciation House will take on the responsibility of paying for those hotels, we'll activate them, and we will bring up some of our volunteers. We need people from Albuquerque to come to learn how to do it so that then we can pull back. It worked amazingly well. 5 different groups then came into existence in Albuquerque who were then in a position to text me and say, Ruben, this coming week, we can receive a bus here. Ruben, this coming week, our church is going to fund the use of this hotel, send us a bus here. And so I would then say to ICE, I want to send a bus here, I want to send a bus here. So Albuquerque already has individuals who were part and are part of the hospitality, and so they can be brought back to help teach. Annunciation House is also willing to send volunteers to help a church activate and what's required. So if your church says we want to do that, we can send volunteers to be here for that first bus. We have the list of the items, the categories of what's necessary for hospitality, how some churches, we have a church that is doing hospitality every day, Monday through Friday. They don't have any showers. They went to the people that the company that rents porta potties. They also have shower stalls that they rent. And so the church got 2 or 3 shower stalls, and they hook them up, and they have their showers, you know, and they have come with little heaters on there. So you're right. First time around, we don't, but it's just amazing how quickly people get the hang of it, and then they start doing their own adaptation to their particular situation.
We have questions.
Yes.
I'll speak up, and this is just related to what you're talking about. Most of you are affiliated with a church or a parish here, but there's the reverse model as well. I just moved here, I'm not, but I understand the model at Annunciation House. I was just there last week. So I understand that structure, but I don't know a place to go. So I think we can all look at, you know, you have the facility, but there are probably even other people here who understand categorically what's needed and what the scaffolding is, and would be happy to find a place in this, and work with some of the bigger groups and entities here.
Chief Sherry, I've been trying to ask the question for a while. We were a part of the last wave that came through, but we worked on teams with people providing certain services. We had people with medical professions that could be on a team. We had people that provided translation. Those are my concerns. We have the capacity in our church building. I'm pastor at Monte Vista Christian Church. We have showers, we have space to take people in. I need to get the board approval to do that. But my concern is it's an aging congregation, they don't have a lot of ability to work round the clock providing services. I wanna be sure that we are still talking about the same kind of model we did in 2019, where they were teams of people, like you're saying, from across the different faith communities providing service at a particular hospitality site, including being able to do translation, communication, because I think that's gonna be a big barrier for many of the congregations providing sites. So are we talking about creating these teams again like we did in 19, so that you can then pull from those teams if you become a site?
What I wanna be clear on, what I have learned is the importance of each hospitality site understanding that their independence and their autonomy, because we are using the facility, the building that belongs to a church. So if you do hospitality in this church, then we want to respect the autonomy and independence of this church. Having said that, if this church says we don't have enough volunteers, then by all means, we need to make that known to the larger faith community so that it can supplant where they are missing volunteers. Your example of a church, a faith community that is perhaps older and the number of volunteers that may be limited, there's quite a few churches who have that same profile. And they say, we can provide some volunteers. We're not going to be able to provide all of them. Language could be a factor. Last night in a meeting that I was at, there was a woman there who said, I'm bilingual, I can help with that. And she, for one, was saying, I want to connect. I want to connect someplace. So there will be a need to be able to provide you with resources. I would appeal to the churches that geographically are nearest you as my first go-to place. In terms of, if your board approves it, then my next step would be is to call a meeting of the pastors of the nearby and say, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna need help in these areas. I wanna ask you if your faith communities would be interested in working with us to make this happen. That's what I would do. The committees that a hospitality site needs, and these committees don't have to be super big, some of them can be small, but the committees, literally on a list, you're talking about, we're gonna need a committee that's gonna handle clothing. You are gonna need to have a place, you're gonna have to sort it, you're gonna have to organize it, you're gonna have to stamp it, you take care of clothing. We're gonna need a committee that's gonna take care of food. It's your job to make sure there's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's variety on that, and you're welcome. You don't have to fix it yourself. You can go to neighboring churches, some have gone to restaurants, and it's amazing. Some restaurants have said, we want to help. We'll provide you a dinner every so often, so you make a calendar. That's your job, committee. You have a committee that does registration. When the bus comes in, we're going to register everybody, and it's our job to start making the phone calls to the sponsors. You're going to have a transportation committee. It's your job to get people to transport. So these committees are pretty similar in all the hospitality sites. Each hospitality site is able to generate people to staff several of the committees. Others, they've got to go to neighboring churches to ask for help, you know. Might this lead to a group of pastors that stay in touch, that are able to communicate on that level to redirect resources. I know that in 2018, 2019, I believe that you all had the clothing bank here, did you not? Where, okay, where clothing donations could be brought, and then the different hospitality sites could then take to their sites to use with the population that they came in, okay? So that's how I would respond to that.
Well, that's kind of what I'm asking is we had gotten things down to a really good, smooth moving machine in 19. After a lot of stops and starts, we were able to have these large teams of people to draw from, but we didn't have to replicate it at every time we had a bus come in. We had teams of people that could respond across all of the faith community. And I'm wondering if that might be a good way to approach this, is to start developing those larger teams of each of those committees, so that when a congregation brings the bus in, they have this list of volunteers on these different teams to then pull from, to help process through and receive all of the refugees. Or, I mean, it sounds like you're saying of each site that becomes a hospitality site would create those committees of neighboring churches if need be.
What I'm saying is, both of them are possible.
Okay.
I don't want us to get stuck in saying, we can't do anything because this particular model isn't complete.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of any Albuquerque hotels right now that are standing by to take people?
There is one hotel right now that is functioning, that has received a bus about every other week, and that's the only one that I'm aware of. That's the only one that I have sent buses of refugees. They received a bus this past Wednesday. So.
Can I ask, there are a bunch of organizers, I think, in this room right now, and a couple faith communities who are expecting to be organizing as people come in. If you're expecting to be one of those organizers, would you mind standing up so that everyone can see and then connect in with you later?
I'm Eleanor Milroy, it's the Albuquerque asylum-seeker well.
Other questions? Yes.
I'm just curious if things have changed since 2019 around COVID, and if there's special considerations that we need to take into account, or how Annunciation has dealt with it, or not.
Correct. Certainly, the COVID landscape at this particular moment is different than the COVID landscape of 4 months ago, and that was different from the landscape of 4 months before that. So, as all of us have seen, COVID has evolved. It continues to evolve. Right now, we probably, generally speaking, are feeling as comfortable as we have been in the 2-year span of COVID. It remains to be seen what it's going to be like going forward. What I can tell you is, and here is where politics gets into this thing, if I was the pastor of this church here, and my congregation says, yes, we're going to receive a bus every other Monday or every other Tuesday, whatever. We're going to receive a bus. There's about 50 people on that bus. I want me to know that other than the building codes, where the city building codes may say, Ruben, you can't have 50 people in that small little space. Other than those kinds of considerations, it's up to us to decide how we want to handle COVID. So, our community can consult with one of the infectious disease doctors here in Albuquerque and say, what do you think, what do you recommend? And he or she may say to us, well, you know, we can get you COVID tests, you can test everybody when they get off the bus. If anybody tests positive, we separate them, the rest, they're here, we contact their sponsors, and we move on. Those that were positive, we're gonna see if Albuquerque has a COVID hotel where they can quarantine. If they do, we're gonna send them there to do the 5 days. After the 5 days are over, they come back, we contact their sponsors, and they're on their way. I have that latitude. I can also say, we're not gonna test. We're just not gonna test. Everybody that comes in, if someone is feeling bad, we'll separate and test, but aside from that, we're not gonna test. There is no one that can say to me, you have to do this. It isn't. However, if I go to government agency A or B or C and ask that government agency to give me money, then I have to look at what I sign and, here's this clause here. It says, you will operate under the COVID mandates of this city or this state or this entity. But what does that mean? It says you're gonna have to do it the way we say or we don't give you any money. So then I have to decide how I feel about that. So right now, there are places that are not doing any testing at all unless someone is symptomatic. Then they separate, they test, they need to be quarantined, they go to a COVID hotel. Other than that, they won't. And then there are other places that test, and if they're positive, they go to a COVID hotel. Everybody else, they move on, you know. The thing that we need to keep in mind is if I bring in the Binex test and I test everyone in this room, all that test will tell me is that on April the 8th at 11:08 in the morning, you're negative. You could take a Binex test at 11 o'clock tonight and it could be positive. Because this whole COVID thing got so politicized, it has hampered our ability to move forward. And so now politics get into it, and some people say, you've got to do it this way, other people say, you don't. My concern is that refugees end up being treated or held to a standard that is different than what anybody else is being held. So, I know that's a long answer, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that as a church, at Annunciation House, no one can tell Annunciation House how we handle COVID. We decide that for ourselves, but we don't take a penny from any government entity. Okay? And so, we really appreciate that, you know. All our volunteers are trained to do the COVID test. We do a lot of COVID testing. We do not quarantine anyone else that didn't test positive. We only quarantine those that test positive. Everybody else, we move on, knowing full well that today 150 refugees are arriving at Casa del Refugio. We're gonna test 150 people. Right now, our positivity rate is at about 2 to 3%. So out of the 150, we will have maybe 5 or 6 positives. They will go to a hotel. Everybody else, we're gonna send on their way. Knowing that there may be COVID positive people in that group that aren't testing positive yet. just like at 11:08 this morning, there are people in this room that will not test positive, but may test positive tonight or tomorrow. Okay? We need to move them on. Okay? Yes?
Are sponsors expected, or do they pay for part of the transportation for the person, or how is that cost taken care of?
Generally, they pay for the full cost.
They do.
Yeah, generally, yeah. The vast majority, the sponsor pays for the full fare of the airline or for the full fare of the bus.
So who takes care of the arrangement of getting that money in, so you get a person on that bus?
Usually what we ask is the sponsor, if I'm a refugee and you're my cousin and you live in Chicago, one of the volunteers would call you and say, your cousin has arrived. Oh, okay, great. Now we need to go buy a plane ticket or a bus ticket and then call us back with the locator number or the confirmation number if it's a bus. So you get on the internet, you buy the plane ticket in my name, you call back the volunteer and says, Ruben's got a plane to leave tomorrow on United, here's the locator number, and then we take responsibility of getting me to the airport. Okay? Yeah, that has worked fairly well. There is, the Diocese of Las Cruces has a program that they developed, that they use, that has worked out immensely well in doing transportation arrangements. You know, it's their model, going back to, it's their model, you know, and it's worked extremely well for them, you know. Yes, ma'am.
Ruben, you mentioned that the cooperating cities for this are Albuquerque, Las Cruces, Denver, and Dallas. Just curious, is Phoenix included in that?
No, and the reason that I don't wanna send anybody to Tucson and Phoenix, because Arizona is an entry place. They have Nogales, and their Nogales, the border right there is very limited in their capacity to provide hospitality. So immigration brings everybody to Tucson and Phoenix. So they're gonna be releasing people in those cities. I don't want to add to that. So I just can't. If it turned out that the flow was not what was expected in Nogales, then I might go to Tucson. But other than that, I feel I need to stay away just because they're gonna need all hands on deck for them to take care of what's coming in through the Arizona border. Thank you. Yes?
You mentioned that the judges in the, El Paso district are not sympathetic for granting, refugee status. Is Albuquerque in that district?
It is, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yes?
It sounds like, there might be some best practices on the ways of doing things. Is there any communication of those best practices? You were talking about, Las Cruces, and they have a good program.
Yes, you will find that hospitality sites are incredibly generous in their willingness to share what they have learned in their experience with other sites. And as I said, we are also willing to have some of our volunteers travel and be, especially for that first arrival. We also have all kinds of sheets with information that we can make available, you know. Something else that I would mention, and some of you have already mentioned, that volunteers have gone down to volunteer with us. Every 2 weeks, we receive short-term volunteers. They've gotta be individuals that are willing to make a 2-week minimum commitment, you know. So people arrive on Saturday, they begin orientation on Sunday, and we have arrivals every 2 weeks to help us staff Casa del Refugiado, because it's this fairly large building. So if any of you, you know, are finding yourself feeling restless and, things are not moving along for you as fast as you would like, I'm more than happy to kidnap you. So yes, we clearly could use, your help in El Paso. But my first priority would be is to have you help set up, stand up hospitality sites in Albuquerque. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious if there's, a centralized location, that could be recommended if I encounter people who aren't necessarily part of the faith group, and they say, ooh, I'd like to be a volunteer, if you can name the places in Albuquerque that we can get people signed up at, and volunteer.
Because it's the only site that is actually right now receiving buses, I would ask you to connect with Eleanor. Okay.
Well, we don't have an office, we're at a hotel right now, and you wanna come down to the airport, Ramada, we're gonna be there for the next day or two. Room 129.
And so I would channel you to her, because right now, we wanna make sure that they have the volunteers they need to staff, because I need to ask them to start taking the bus every single week, okay? I need them to increase, their space. There's some issues that they're working with in terms of COVID and all that kind of stuff, you know? But that's why we want other sites. As soon as there is another site that activates, that's gonna become a second place, you know? But I know what you're getting at, and I think there is gonna be a need for that, and you're here listening to all of this in terms of yes, you're listening to all of this, and I just had a meeting this morning with Catholic Charities and a couple of other people, and I think that might be a very good role in terms of the organizing, the centralization of organization where communication can be had to channel people effectively, you know. Because there are going to be individuals that may not be part of any faith community who says, I want to help out, but I'm not coming to this from a faith community, I'm coming at it from my own humanitarian commitment. And there has to be a way to communicate that. So right now I'm saying, Eleanor.
I believe that there is another organization called FaithWorks here in Albuquerque that is already accepting some of the asylees. And they've sent out an email that they do need volunteers there. So they might be a great place to use as a contact and maybe as a clearinghouse for volunteers. I'm not volunteering them because I would volunteer there, but I have a friend who's working there. So.
Do you know where they are getting the refugees they are receiving, where they're coming from?
Can I address this, Ruben?
Yes.
Executive Director of Faith.
Wonderful.
So actually, FaithWorks works with asylum seekers who are residing in Albuquerque, not the ones coming up through the border. Completely different structure. And so all of the volunteers, and there are many of you here today who work with FaithWorks, those are for the families that live here. So I see lots of folks here who are volunteers for our program, but we're not involved with the receiving of the buses right now. What's confusing is that we are called FaithWorks, and the group that's receiving buses is called Interfaith. So it gets confusing. So, well, it's not, I know you have a different name now, but it originated as the Interfaith group. So that's why it gets confusing. So anybody who wants to volunteer for FaithWorks, that's for asylum seekers who live in Albuquerque.
And we're happy to evolve your model.
I'll chime in here. Hello, everybody. I'm Javier Benavides, organizer with Albuquerque Interfaith, and Eleanor's been one of my most amazing mentors in this role. We had a great meeting this morning, and I think this is an opportunity. And what we see, it's not necessarily how we approach building power, which is our primary responsibility in this role, this organization. But what we saw in 2019, the beauty of that operation, was the relationality that was created amongst the volunteers, and how many Protestant churches, I think some Catholic entities too, were able to live their faith. I mean, to actually to see the person in front of them, to welcome them. This is kind of like Ellis Island, South by Southwest, I was thinking. So it's a chance just to, we're doing our best to agitate. The Catholic Church right now, that was kind of the theme this morning. But to see this as an opportunity to grow something really meaningful and deep, and to leverage it to deepen in our institutions. I mean, that's to us what's most important, is not like this mobilizing of this operation that, you know, sadly we saw what happened in 2019 when federal policy shut us all down. And it was sad, but a lot of good came out of that because of the relationships that were formed, the people that we met that are still involved today, and I see so many here. So I think Eleanor said the best way is to see how the initial group is how they operate, to volunteer with them, and hopefully this continues to grow, and that, and eventually what we land up with within maybe a month or two, is just this operation of Albuquerque shining its heart like it did last time. That in that we can also grow some sustained power for the long run, for the needs here in New Mexico also.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have a website or?
We do. It's albuquerqueinterfaith.org.
I want to thank you all for coming this morning. As I said when I started, I'm here to appeal to you. Don't let anything hold you back. You know, gospel is incredibly powerful. Consider yourselves being on the horse and getting knocked off the horse, and knowing that you gotta do something. So I really hope to hear from you. I'm also praying that I end up with the name, the cell phone, and the email address of everybody here this morning. I'm praying that I will end up with that. So I don't know if there was a sign-in when you all came in. I'm trusting that you will see to it that I get that, okay? Blessings on all of you. Thank you so very much.
Jeff and Cheryl, the ones